On the desert moon, Sereth 4, the dawn was not gentle. The sky turned from violet to white-yellow in minutes. Heat rose from the sand like a living thing, reaching up to grab anything that moved. Wind hissed across the dunes and left sharp patterns behind, like claws dragged through dust. In the middle of this harsh world lay a nesting ground. Small hills of sand and broken shells covered a wide circle of rock. The Veshkar, the native reptilian people of Serath 4, had come in the night. They had laid their eggs in a deep pit, guarded them until sunrise, and then stood in a circle to watch them hatch. Their scales were dark green and bronze, hard and rough like old stone. Their yellow eyes glowed in the dim light. They did not smile or laugh. To them, this was not a happy moment. It was a test. The first egg cracked. A wet snout pushed through, then a small, scaled head. The hatchling's skin was a normal dark color with small specks of gold. It squeaked, blinked, and began to move. The adults nodded in approval. More eggs cracked. One by one, more young came into the world. Some were slower, some were louder, some were confused and clumsy. The adults watched them with flat, calm expressions. They would not help. Veshkar believed that if a hatchling could not stand on its own, it did not deserve to stand at all. Then one last egg started to move. It trembled for a long time and did not break. The shell shook weakly. Tiny claws scratched at the inside. There was a soft, high sound like a faint cry. The adults glanced at one another, but still they did nothing. Finally, the egg split down the middle. A small, thin creature slipped out and fell onto the warm sand. It lay there, still and quiet for a moment, breathing fast. This hatchling was not dark green. It was white. Its scales were pale as bone, with faint pink shadows where thin skin showed through. Its eyes were red, like fresh coals, but weak. It blinked fast, as if the light hurt. The bright glare of Serath 4's sun stabbed straight into those sensitive eyes. A murmur moved through the adults. "Albino," one of them hissed. "Unfit," another said. "Marked by weakness," a third added. Among the Veshkar, an albino hatchling was not a sign of beauty or rarity. It was a sign of fragility, a creature that would not survive, a burden that would drain resources, an error that nature itself would soon correct. The hatchling tried to stand. Its legs shook. It slipped and fell again. A normal youngling would be stronger, faster. This one looked thin and small, almost transparent in the harsh light. It made a soft sound like a whimper. The Veshkar matriarch stepped forward. She was tall, her scales almost black, with silver scars across her jaw. Her voice was cold. "The dunes will decide," she said. That was their tradition. A weak hatchling was left on the open sand. If it survived the heat, the winds, and the predators, then perhaps it was worthy. But none ever had. The other hatchlings were already moving toward the shaded rocks, where the adults would guide them to the caves and teach them their first lessons. They chirped and crawled, bumping into each other. Not one of them looked back. The albino hatchling tried to follow. It took a step, another, then collapsed. Sand stuck to its wet skin. Its tiny chest rose and fell too quickly. Strong hands lifted it. For a moment, the hatchling thought it was being saved. It reached out, claws scratching at the air, but the matriarch did not carry it to safety. She walked away from the nesting ground, across the hot sand, farther and farther from the stones and the faint smell of water. The hatchling's weak limbs kicked. It made thin, panicked cries. The matriarch's face did not change. She walked until the nesting ground was no longer in sight. The dunes around her looked all the same, endless waves of bright sand under a sharp, burning sky. There, with no shade and no shelter, she stopped. She lowered the hatchling onto the sand. Its white body shook as it felt the full heat beneath it. The sun above stabbed down like a blade. The hatchling cried, a thin, broken sound. The matriarch looked down at it. There was no hatred in her eyes, only certainty. "Let the sand judge you," she said. Then she turned her back and walked away. The hatchling reached out a tiny claw toward her retreating figure, but its arm was too small and too weak. She did not turn. In a few moments, she was gone over the next dune. Silence fell. The wind picked up. Fine dust blew over the hatchling's body. It coughed and sneezed and tried to push itself up, but its legs trembled and slid out from under it again. Time passed. The sun climbed higher. Heat wrapped around the little body like a heavy blanket. The sand under its belly was so hot it felt like a slow burn. The hatchling tried to move, but every action took more effort. Its throat was dry. Its tongue stuck to the roof of its mouth. It did not understand why it was alone. It did not understand why the others had gone away. It only knew that it hurt, that it was scared, and that no one was coming. Something moved in the sky above. For a moment, the hatchling's blurry eyes saw a dark shape circling, a bird-like predator of Sarath 4, wings wide, searching for easy prey. The hatchling tried to press itself into the sand, trying to be smaller, to disappear. The shadow circled once, twice, then drifted away. The hatchling was too small to see from high above. It was not even important enough to be hunted. Its body shook again. The heat was worse now. Each breath hurt. Every time it cried out, the sound that left its throat was weaker. It wanted warmth, but not this burning. It wanted a heavy, safe weight over it, like the shell used to be. It did not know the word mother or home or safe, but it felt the absence of all of them like an open wound. The wind shifted again, stronger this time. Sand blew over its face. Tiny grains scratched at its eyes. It shut them and cried, turning its head to the side. Far away, something else moved. Not in the sky this time, but on the ground. At first, it was only a tremor in the sand, a faint vibration that the hatchling could feel in its belly and its limbs. It did not know what it was. A predator, perhaps. Another danger. The tremor grew. The faint sound of an engine carried across the dunes, a low, rough hum. It came closer, closer, mixed with the hiss of sand. A dark shape appeared at the edge of a dune, metal, not flesh, angular, alien, a human ground rover. It rolled slowly over the sand, heavy wheels kicking up clouds of dust behind it. The sun flashed off its reinforced windows and the thick armor around its sides. A metal antenna stuck up like a thin, crooked horn. Small sensors blinked with blue indicator lights. Inside, Sergeant Mara Keene yawned and stretched her neck until it cracked. She had been driving for hours. The desert never seemed to end. "Dylan," she said, her voice rough from lack of water and too much recycled air. "Anything interesting out there yet?" The rover's AI replied in a calm, polite tone. "Negative, Mara. The sand remains sand, the heat remains unpleasant, and your sarcasm remains predictable." She snorted. "Glad at least one of us is entertained." Her mission was simple. She was running supplies between two small human stations on Sarath 4. Medical packages, tools, coolant, spare parts. Nothing heroic. Nothing dramatic. Just a long, hot trip across a piece of land that did not want her there. Mara looked out at the dunes. They all looked the same to her, waves and waves of tan and gold, stretching to every horizon. "Adjust sensor sensitivity," she said. "Life signs? 10-kilometer radius? I'm bored enough to care about lizards." "Running scan," Dylan replied. A faint hum passed through the rover. On the front panel, numbers and graphs began to dance. Most of it was nothing useful. The slight heat signatures of buried rocks, tiny pockets of gas, small fluctuations in the air. Then a tiny spike appeared, weak, fading. Dylan paused for a fraction of a second. "That is odd," the AI said. "I detect a minor biological life sign approximately 300 meters ahead. Very small, very weak." "Veshkar?" Mara asked. "Possible, but unlikely. The signal is too faint for an adult, and we are far from known settlements or hatch grounds. Mara frowned. Show me. A small dot appeared on the screen. The rover's path line adjusted automatically. We can avoid it, Dylan said. Given the weakness of the signal, it is probable the organism is already dying. Local regulations advise non-interference with native fauna unless— Yeah, Mara cut in. Drive toward it. Mara— She leaned forward and tapped the panel. You gave me a note in my last performance review, remember? Shows substandard curiosity outside mission parameters. Consider this course correction. There was a brief silence. Then Dylan sighed in a very human way that it had copied from her. Adjusting route, the AI said. The rover turned slightly and headed toward the signal. The hum of the engine grew louder inside the cabin. Mara squinted through the front window, but all she could see was sand and more sand. Range? She asked. 70 meters, Dylan replied. Life sign is fading further. I must recommend— Yeah, Mara said softly. Recommend we hurry. Outside, the rover rolled up the side of a dune and reached the top. Beyond it, the ground dipped down in a wide curve. The heat shimmer made everything look like it was underwater. But in the middle of that shimmering air, something small moved. Mara slowed the rover and stopped. Dust drifted past the front window. For a second, she thought it was just a pale rock or a piece of shell caught in the wind. Then it twitched. Mara's eyes widened. She grabbed her helmet from the hook above her seat. Open outer hatch, she said. Dylan hesitated. Environmental conditions are extreme. Heat and radiation levels— I'm not going on a picnic, Mara said. Just opening the door. The outer door hissed. Hot, dry air rushed into the small space, carrying the smell of dust and old stone. Mara stepped out, boots sinking a little into the sand. The heat hit her at once. Even through her suit, she felt it pressing against her skin. She shaded her eyes and walked toward the small white shape. The creature lay half buried in sand. It was tiny, not much bigger than her hand. Its thin body shook with each weak breath. Pale scales shone in the sun, almost glowing. It looked like it had been carved from ice and left in a fire. It made a soft sound, like a broken squeak. Mara stared down at it. Oh, she breathed. You poor thing. She knelt slowly, careful not to scare it, though she guessed it was too far gone to run. The hatchling's red eyes opened a tiny bit. It saw a tall shape above it, strange and dark against the bright sky. It did not understand what she was. Human, outsider, alien. All it knew was that something had finally come. For the first time since it had been left on the sand, it was not alone. The tiny albino hatchling lay on the sand like a melting piece of ice. Its breaths came fast and shallow. The desert's heat beat down on its small body as if trying to erase its existence. When Mara Keen leaned over it, the creature's blurry red eyes struggled to focus on her shadow. It did not know what she was. It only knew she was different from the burning world around it. Taller, darker, cooler. Mara reached out slowly. Easy there, little guy, she murmured. Her voice was gentle, but the hatchling still flinched weakly when her gloved hand came near. It tried to crawl only a few inches, dragging itself with trembling claws. Its legs failed almost immediately. Mara's heart squeezed at the sight. She had seen injured animals before during her travels on different planets, birds with broken wings, small mammals caught in machinery, lizards dehydrated near mining stations, but she had never seen something so small, so fragile, and so obviously alone. Dylan's voice buzzed in her helmet earpiece. Mara, readings confirm the creature is a Veshkar youngling. Age estimate, less than 1 hour. That young? She whispered. Yes, and its life signs are dangerously low. Cultural records indicate that albino Veshkar are traditionally— Don't say disposed of, she said quickly, looking down at the hatchling. I don't need that word right now. There was a short pause. Very well, but you must acknowledge their customs when deciding your next action. Mara didn't answer. She didn't want to think about customs. She wanted to think about survival, the hatchling's survival. She lifted her hand and touched the creature's back with one finger. Even through her glove, she could feel how hot its skin had become. The hatchling let out a thin cry and pressed its face into the sand, trying to escape the sun. No, no, don't do that, Mara said softly. She reached under its tiny body. Her glove slid gently beneath its belly and lifted it from the scorching ground. The hatchling tensed at the movement. For a moment it squirmed weakly, but then it stopped, too exhausted to resist. It curled up in the cup of her palm like a trembling snowflake. Mara felt something inside her, an instinct she did not know she still had after years of rough missions. An instinct to protect, to shelter something small and helpless. She stood up carefully and turned toward the rover. The screen on her wrist flickered with warnings. Dylan, she said, open the med compartment. Mara, the AI replied, I must remind you again that non-interference with Veshkar biological development is strongly recommended. Returning that hatchling to its natural environment is the advised not happening, Mara said. Mara, I mean it. The AI sighed again, sounding exasperated in the way only a machine that had spent too much time around humans could. Very well, Dylan said. Med compartment unlocked. Mara walked quickly toward the rover. The sand shifted under her boots, and the heat hit her back like fire. She shielded the hatchling with her other hand, blocking the sun as much as she could. As she climbed into the rover, the inside temperature felt like a cool wave compared to the brutal desert air. The hatchling twitched in her hand, reacting to the sudden change. Its breathing grew faster for a moment, then slowed again, small and fragile. Mara sat on the rover's bench and opened the med kit. Inside were basic supplies, hydration gel packets, bandages, pain spray, small nutrient pads. None of them were made for alien infants, but she had to try. She tore open a tiny hydration gel pack and squeezed a single drop onto her fingertip. The gel glittered like liquid glass. She moved her hand close to the hatchling's mouth. Hey, she whispered, try this. It'll help. At first, the hatchling didn't react. Then its tongue, thin and pink, flicked out. It tasted the gel. Instantly, it grabbed at her finger with both tiny claws and sucked the drop greedily. Mara let out a soft laugh. Well, someone's hungry. Dylan spoke again. Life signs improving, slightly. Mara fed it another small drop. The hatchling drank it with surprising strength for something so weak. Its eyes blinked open a little wider. They were red, but under the light, they looked almost like glowing rubies. When she offered a third drop, the hatchling pressed itself against her glove, as if somehow understanding she was the source of safety. It was a small movement, but it felt like trust. Good, Mara whispered. You're doing okay. But the moment of calm didn't last long. A sharp alert beeped from the rover's main console. Dylan's tone changed, becoming more serious. Mara, the AI said, we have a problem. Mara stiffened. What now? Veshkar drone activity detected. A reconnaissance unit is approaching our position from the west. Her eyebrows shot up. Already? That fast? Yes. And it is scanning the area with wide-range life sensors. Mara looked down at the hatchling in her hand. Its small body curled tighter as if sensing her tension. They'll sense him, won't they? She asked quietly. High probability, Dylan replied. Veshkar hatch grounds are significant cultural sites. The presence of an abandoned youngling in the dunes may trigger a response. Response as in? A retrieval team, the AI said. Or a hunter unit. Mara felt her stomach tighten. The Veshkar were not openly hostile to humans, but their customs were strict. Interfering with one of their traditions, even accidentally, could lead to conflict. Mara, Dylan continued, according to cultural law, humans are forbidden from rescuing abandoned hatchlings. The act is considered disrespectful to the Veshkar's ancient selection rights. She closed the medkit with a click. Yeah? Well, I don't care about rights. The hatchling nuzzled into her glove as she lifted it closer to her chest. I care about him. The AI was silent for a moment. Then Dylan said in a softer tone, Then you must decide our next move quickly. Mara took a deep breath. Outside, the sun beat down on the rover. Far away, the faint hum of a drone drifted on the wind like a warning. We're not handing him over, she said firmly. Then we must avoid detection, Dylan responded. Recommending route alteration, northeast toward Shelter Ridge. That's a 3-hour detour. Yes, but it has deep ravines that may hide us from aerial scans. Mara hesitated. Her original route would get her to Station N4 by nightfall. A detour meant arriving late, maybe even missing check-in. Her supervisors wouldn't be happy. She looked at the hatchling again. Its breathing was steadier now. It had moved one tiny claw to rest on her thumb as if holding on to her. 3 hours was a small price. Do it, she said. Route us to Shelter Ridge. Adjusting course, Dylan replied. The rover's engine rumbled as it prepared to move. Mara opened a storage drawer built into the side of the bench. Inside were a few soft rags and an old travel blanket. She folded one piece of cloth into a loose nest shape and placed it inside a shallow container. Then she lowered the hatchling gently into it. To her surprise, the creature crawled back toward her hand. Its tiny claws latched onto her glove again, refusing to let go. Oh, she murmured. You clingy little thing. Dylan observed. It is likely seeking warmth, and perhaps comfort. Mara smiled faintly. I guess I can give him that. She moved her hand into the small cloth nest so the hatchling could curl against her fingers. Once settled, the creature let out a soft purr-like vibration, something between relief and tiredness. Its eyes closed halfway. Mara secured the container beside her seat so it wouldn't slide during the drive. She kept her hand inside it, letting the hatchling hold on to her as the rover started moving. The engine's hum filled the cabin. The dunes outside rolled by in waves. For a while, neither she nor Dylan spoke. The peace was fragile. Mara felt it. Dylan, she said quietly, do you think they'll follow? Yes, the AI answered without hesitation. Once they realize a hatchling is missing, they will track the area. Veshkar drones are precise. And what happens when they find out a human has him? There was a long pause. Most likely, Dylan said, they will attempt to reclaim him. By force, if necessary. Mara's jaw tightened. She looked at the pale hatchling curled around her finger, sleeping with its face buried into the cloth. No, she wouldn't let anyone hurt him. We'll handle it, she said. I hope so, Dylan replied. Because if you choose to keep that hatchling safe, our mission has just become far more complicated. Mara leaned back in her seat and looked out at the endless desert. Then we'll be complicated together, she said. Outside, the rover sped toward the distant ridges. Inside, the small albino hatchling slept peacefully for the first time in its life, held by hands that refused to abandon him. The rover moved like a metal beetle across the burning dunes, leaving a faint trail behind it. Mara kept one hand on the wheel and the other inside the small cloth nest where the hatchling rested. The tiny creature slept lightly, waking every few minutes to cling to her fingers or make a soft squeak before drifting off again. Its trust felt strange to her, gentle, warm, and unexpectedly heavy on her heart. For a long time, the desert stayed quiet. Only the hum of the engine and the whisper of the wind broke the silence, but Mara could tell this peace would not last. She glanced at the rear camera feed on her console. Still clear, still empty, still safe. But the knot in her stomach stayed tight. "Dylan," she said, "status on the drone?" "Scanning," the AI replied. "No direct visual yet, but its signal strength has increased by 5% in the last 10 minutes. Meaning, it is searching more aggressively and getting closer." Mara sighed. "Of course it is." The rover continued its steady climb up a slope of soft sand. The sun glared off the ground, making everything shimmer. Behind her, the hatchling stirred and pressed its face against her glove again. She gently stroked the top of its head with her thumb. "You're okay," she whispered. "I've got you." She hoped that promise would stay true. The rover reached the top of a dune and began descending toward a stretch of flat land. Shelter Ridge was still far in the distance, faint shadows of tall rock formations barely visible through the haze. Suddenly, the console flashed red. "Mara!" Dylan said sharply. "Incoming aerial contact!" Her heart jumped. She looked through the front window, scanning the sky. At first, she saw nothing. Then a dark, insect-shaped machine appeared above a distant dune, its wings beating rapidly. A Veshkar recon drone. Its body gleamed with bronze metal, and its sensors glowed a bright yellow. The drone drifted toward them like a slow, watching predator. Mara swore under her breath. "How fast is it coming?" "Very fast." The drone sped up, flying straight toward the rover. Its wings buzzed loudly, stirring the desert air. Dust blew around it in tight circles. "Dylan," she said quickly, "deploy visual scramble." "Already done," the AI replied. "But Veshkar drones have strong scanners. They will detect the hatchling's signature." Mara's eyes hardened. "Then we keep moving." She pushed the rover's throttle forward. The engine growled, and the wheels dug deep into the sand as the vehicle surged ahead. With every second, the drone came closer. The hatchling woke with a frightened chirp and tightened its claws around Mara's glove. Its small body trembled. Mara lowered her voice. "Shh. It's okay. Stay calm. I won't let them take you." But she wasn't sure how she could stop them. The drone's shadow passed over the rover. A sharp beam of yellow light scanned the top of the vehicle. The beam moved slowly back and forth, searching for heat signatures. Dylan's voice rang in her ear. "They found him!" The scanner beeped loudly. The drone tilted slightly as if focusing. Then it emitted a deep, echoing sound, a call signal. Within seconds, more signals answered. Mara swallowed hard. "That's bad." "Yes," Dylan replied calmly. "Very." Minutes later, the sky filled with symbols on the rover's radar. Veshkar signals. Multiple. A patrol ship, a hunter vessel, 2 smaller escorts. They were all heading straight for her. The hatchling chirped anxiously and buried its head into the cloth nest. Mara felt its little body vibrating with fear. Dylan's voice turned sharp. "Mara, they will intercept us before we reach Shelter Ridge." "Then we don't go to Shelter Ridge," she said. "You have an alternative?" "Yeah." Mara turned the rover sharply to the right. "We hide." She angled the rover toward a narrow dip between dunes, an area of lower land that cut like a shallow valley through the desert. It offered some cover from aerial views. As she drove into the valley, the drone followed overhead, circling like a hawk. The Veshkar ships weren't visible yet, but their signals grew stronger. Mara parked the rover beside a tall dune and shut off the engine. The hum faded into silence. The hatchling whimpered softly. "Quiet," she whispered. "They're close." The sky darkened as something large passed overhead. A Veshkar hunter ship. Its shape resembled a giant horned beetle with thick armor plates and glowing yellow eyes for sensors. It stopped above the valley and hovered low, kicking up dust with its thrusters. Then a deep, vibrating voice echoed from its loudspeakers. "Human vehicle, identify yourself." Mara closed her eyes for a moment. "Here we go." She pressed a button on her console, opening a communication link. "This is Sergeant Mara Keene," she said. "Human supply runner. What's the issue?" The voice answered with a growl-like rhythm. "You carry one of ours, a hatchling. It was left for the judgment of the dunes. You interfere with sacred right. Present the youngling. Now." Mara felt anger rise in her chest. She looked down at the sleeping hatchling, its body curled against her hand, trusting her completely. "I can't do that," she said. The reply came instantly. "Your refusal violates ancient law. The dunes decide fate, not humans." Mara tightened her grip on the wheel. "Your law nearly killed him." "That was the purpose." Her jaw clenched. "I won't hand him over just to die." For a moment, the comm line went silent. Then another voice spoke, this one deeper, calmer, but colder. "Human, this is Commander Ralcor. Stand outside your vehicle. The youngling will be reclaimed. If you resist, consequences will follow." Mara's pulse quickened. Dylan's voice whispered in her ear. "They will come down in person." "I know. What is your plan?" She looked again at the little creature curled in her hand. It let out a tiny sound, half sleepy, half scared. Mara's expression hardened. "My plan," she said, "is to protect him." The side hatch of the hunter ship opened, releasing a blast of hot air. 3 Veshkar warriors stepped out. Their tall bodies were covered in dark armor that glinted like obsidian. Their claws were sharp, and their eyes glowed a fierce yellow. At their center walked Commander Ralcor. He was taller than the others, with deep bronze scales and a scar running across his left eye. His presence made the air feel heavier, as if the desert itself bowed to him. The warriors marched toward the rover. Mara stepped out before they reached it, holding the hatchling gently inside the cloth container. She kept her body half-shielded around him. Ralcor stopped only a few steps away from her. His gaze dropped to the tiny white creature in her hands. The air grew silent. "That one is doomed by nature," Ralcor said. "Its blood is thin, its bones weak. It is not fit to live. Why do you cling to it?" Mara held the hatchling closer. "Because it's alive. Because it wants to live." Ralcor tilted his head. "And so do my warriors. You endanger all by disrupting our law." "It's not a law," Mara said fiercely. "It's a death sentence." "It is tradition. Your interference is dishonor." The hatchling whimpered again, curling tighter into the cloth. Ralcor's eyes narrowed at the sound. "Give him to me." "No." Ralcor's voice deepened. "Human. I will not ask again." Mara met his glowing yellow eyes. She spoke slowly, clearly, fearlessly. "You want him? You'll have to take him from me." The Veshkar warriors hissed, spreading their claws. Ralcor's nostrils flared with irritation, maybe even surprise. A soft beeping noise suddenly echoed behind Mara. Then the desert lit up with engine thrusters. In the sky above, 4 human patrol ships burst through the heat haze, descending fast toward the valley. Ralcor's eyes widened slightly. Mara allowed herself the smallest smile. "Yeah," she said. "Did I forget to mention? Humans don't let their people stand alone." The Veshkar warriors stepped back, forming a defensive stance. Above them, the human patrol ships hovered, weapons aimed but not firing. Yet. The desert had become a silent battlefield where both sides waited. The hatchling pressed its tiny head against Mara's wrist, frightened by the rising tension. Mara whispered softly to him, "It's okay. I'm right here." And she meant every word. Even with 2 alien forces staring each other down, she would not give him up. Not today, not ever. The confrontation had only begun. The desert valley had never known such silence. Not the usual desert quiet. This was the heavy, electric kind that came right before something dangerous happened. On one side stood Commander Ralkor and 3 Veshkar warriors, their dark armor gleaming under the harsh sun. Their claws were ready. Their eyes glowed bright with anger and duty. On the other side stood Mara Keen, alone on the sand except for the tiny albino hatchling clinging to her wrist. Behind her hovered 4 human patrol ships, their engines humming like thunder caught in a cage. The hatchling trembled at the sound, its tiny claws dug into her glove. Mara kept her other hand cupped gently around his fragile body, shielding him from the scorching light and from the tension thickening the air. "Easy, Snowscale," she whispered. "I've got you." The little creature pressed closer to her warmth. Commander Ralkor finally broke the silence. His voice rolled across the dunes like distant thunder. "This is unnecessary conflict, human. You stand alone with what belongs to us. Return the hatchling, and we end this now." Mara glanced briefly at the patrol ships above her, floating steel beasts against the white sky, and then met Ralkor's stare. "I'm not alone," she said calmly, "and he does not belong to you. You left him to die." Ralkor's jaw tightened. His scales caught the sunlight and reflected sharp gold. It was his fate. The dunes judge the weak. It is our way. Your kind has no right to challenge it. "No right?" Mara repeated. "He's a living child." One of the Veshkar warriors hissed loudly. "He is an error, a white scale. His survival threatens the balance of the clutch." Mara stepped forward, carefully but unafraid. "You call him weak," she said, "but he's stronger than you think." Ralkor's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Mara angled her hand slightly so they could see the hatchling, still trembling but alive. Alive despite the odds. "When I found him," she said, "he was barely breathing, but he fought. He tried to stand. He survived the heat longer than anything that small should. He held on to me with more strength than something his size should even have." The hatchling gave a tiny squeak as if agreeing. Ralkor's gaze flickered to the little creature and back to Mara. "This is irrelevant. Tradition is not broken for exceptions. The dunes decide. Always." "Not today," Mara said quietly. A new voice cut in from behind her. Sharp, crisp, military. "Sergeant Keen," Captain Varen called from the lead patrol ship. "Step back. We'll handle negotiations from here." Mara didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on Ralkor. "With respect, Captain," she said. "I'm the one holding him. I stay." There was a pause. Then Varen replied, "Understood." The patrol ships lowered slightly, forming a protective arc around the rover and Mara. Their hulls shimmered under the sun, weapons uncharged but ready. The message was clear. Humans wouldn't shoot first, but they were more than willing to shoot back. Ralkor studied the formation with an unblinking gaze. "You threaten war over a deformed hatchling?" he asked. Mara shook her head. "No. We're standing up to cruelty. You call this tradition, but really it's fear. Fear of what's different." The Veshkar hissed again, but Ralkor remained still, silent and watching. Mara took a slow breath. She wasn't trained for diplomacy. She was a supply driver, not a negotiator, but she had something the Veshkar didn't expect, a reason to stand her ground. "Commander," she said steadily, "you believe he's weak. You believe he'll die anyway. So let me try to save him. If you're right, he won't survive long with us." Ralkor's eyes flashed. "Your kind always meddles, always interferes with what should be left untouched." Mara's voice softened. "Sometimes interfering saves lives." Ralkor stepped closer. Even with her patrol ships behind her, his presence felt like a shadow swallowing the sun. "Why do you care? He is not your kind, not your blood, not even your world." Mara hesitated. Then she answered honestly. Because someone should have cared. The wind shifted. Sand blew across their legs. The hatchling whined and buried itself deeper into Mara's hand. She held him close, feeling his tiny heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. Ralcor stared at the creature again. His gaze flicked briefly to the warriors beside him, then to the human ships above. He seemed to weigh old traditions against a fight he didn't want. One of the Veshkar stepped forward. "Commander, this is wasteful. The hatchling was abandoned. He is no longer Veshkar. Let the human take the burden." Ralcor snapped his head toward the speaker. "Silence! Ancient rites are not dismissed so easily." Mara felt a spark of hope. There were doubts, small but present. "Let me show you something," she said. Ralcor didn't speak, but his silence was permission enough. Mara carefully lifted the hatchling from its cloth nest and held him out. Not far, just enough that Ralcor could see him clearly. The white little creature blinked against the bright sun, then made a small chirping sound. He lifted his tiny claws and reached out toward Mara again. The gesture was impossibly small, but it was also incredibly bold. "He knows who protected him," Mara said softly. Ralcor's expression flickered, only briefly, but Mara saw it, a crack in the solid stone of tradition. Dylan spoke quietly in her ear. "Mara, his cognitive activity is rising. Strongly." Mara didn't look away from Ralcor. "Hear that? He's learning. He's connecting. How many albino hatchlings have you ever seen grow old enough to show potential?" Ralcor stiffened, because the answer was clear. None. Not one. They had all been abandoned at birth. "You've never studied one," Mara pressed. "Never given one a chance. You don't know what he could be." Ralcor let out a long, deep breath. "Even if you speak truth, he is Veshkar. His fate lies with his kind." Mara shook her head gently. "No. His fate lies with whoever chooses to protect him." The hatchling chirped again, louder this time. His small body trembled as he stretched toward her palm. Mara cradled him close, steady and safe. Captain Varen's voice echoed from a loudspeaker. "Commander Ralcor, humanity does not wish for conflict, but we will defend our citizen and the being in her care. We suggest peaceful resolution." Ralcor turned his head slightly, studying the ships. He saw their formation, their readiness, and their unity. Humans were strange creatures, small, fragile, but fierce in ways he didn't entirely understand. He finally spoke. "If the hatchling chooses you, then tradition dictates I cannot force his return." Mara's heart skipped. "He chooses. Not your words, his." All eyes shifted to the hatchling. Ralcor extended a clawed hand toward the small creature. His rough voice softened slightly. "Youngling, we reclaim you. Come." The hatchling looked at the giant Veshkar. His red eyes blinked. He shivered. Then he buried his face in Mara's hand. Mara smiled. The warriors hissed. Ralcor closed his eyes. "The choice is made." He stepped back, slowly, respectfully. "Human Mara Keen, the youngling is yours to raise. But know this, we will watch. His future will be of interest to all Veshkar." Mara nodded. "Fair enough." Ralcor lifted a clawed hand in a low, traditional gesture of release. The other warriors did the same, though reluctantly. The hunter ship's thrusters roared as it lifted back into the sky. One by one, the Veshkar vessels turned and departed, disappearing into the desert horizon. As the silence returned, the hatchling peeked out from Mara's fingers, still scared, but safe. Mara let out the breath she'd been holding. Captain Varen landed his patrol ship and approached her, helmet under his arm. "Well, Sergeant," he said with a faint smile, "you've caused quite a diplomatic wave." Mara shrugged. "I saved a life." He looked at the tiny creature clinging to her. "Looks like it saved a piece of you, too." Mara glanced down at Snowscale. The hatchling nuzzled her thumb again, soft and trusting. Maybe, she said quietly. Above them, the desert sky stretched wide and endless. But for the first time, the little hatchling in Mara's hands was not alone, and neither was she. The confrontation was over. A new beginning had just started. The desert sun began to sink behind the distant dunes, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the sand. Mara Keen adjusted her grip on the albino hatchling, who clung to her hand as if he could feel the pulse of her heartbeat. Snowscale, the name Mara had given him, shivered slightly, not from cold, but from the exhaustion of surviving a day that had tested every fiber of his tiny body. Mara looked out at the horizon, watching the last Veshkar patrols disappear into the heat haze. She felt a quiet satisfaction, mixed with the sharp awareness that their encounter would not be forgotten. The Veshkar were patient, relentless, and proud. They would watch, study, and maybe even challenge her again. But for now, Snowscale was safe. The rover hummed softly beneath them. Mara had slowed it to a crawl as they moved toward Shelter Ridge. The terrain was rugged, a series of rocky outcrops and deep crevices that offered natural protection. Here, she could rest the hatchling and ensure he regained some strength before the long journey back to the nearest human station. Snowscale stirred, opening his red eyes. They glowed faintly in the dimming light, curious and alert. Mara smiled down at him. "You made it," she whispered. "You really did." The hatchling let out a soft chirp, almost like a laugh, and nuzzled her glove. Mara noticed the way he pressed his small body into her hand, seeking warmth and comfort. Despite his size, there was something undeniably brave about him, a spark that had survived the harshest environment imaginable. As the rover bumped over a narrow ridge, Mara thought about the events that had brought them here. She remembered the matriarch, the ritual, and the scorching dunes that had once threatened to claim him. She remembered Ral Kor, his yellow eyes sharp, skeptical, and now tinged with respect. And she remembered her own promise, to protect Snowscale, no matter what. "You're lucky," she murmured. "Most never get a second chance." Snowscale tilted his tiny head as if he understood. Mara chuckled softly. She had no doubt that one day he would surprise everyone, humans and Veshkar alike. The ridge opened into a small canyon. Mara parked the rover in the shade of a jagged rock outcrop. The shadows stretched long across the sand, offering some relief from the heat. She gently lifted Snowscale from the cloth nest and placed him on a soft, flat rock. He wobbled on his tiny legs but stood with determination, peering around at the rocky walls. "You're stronger than you look," Mara said. "I knew it from the start." Snowscale chirped again and tilted his head toward the rover. Mara realized he was curious about this strange machine, the home that had carried him through the desert. She smiled. He had already started learning, observing, and understanding his new world. Mara set about preparing a small feeding station. She crushed a hydration gel packet into a shallow container and added a few nutrient pads she had saved from the med kit. Dylan, the AI, monitored the hatchling's vitals and adjusted the temperature inside the rover to a safe level. Mara watched as Snowscale cautiously approached the food. His red eyes blinked in curiosity, and he took small, deliberate bites. "There you go," Mara encouraged. "Eat, grow, stay strong." For the next few hours, they stayed in the canyon, the rover's engine off to preserve stealth. Mara used the time to observe Snowscale. She noted how he raised his head, scanned his surroundings, and even tilted his tiny ears, or whatever resembled ears, toward distant sounds. Each movement was cautious but intelligent, as though he was learning to measure danger against safety. Dylan spoke softly. "Mara, cognitive development in albino Veshkar is rare. Survival alone is almost impossible. The combination of human intervention and nourishment may result in unprecedented growth. Mara's lips curved into a proud smile. We're making history, Dylan. Just quietly. The sun dipped lower, painting the canyon walls in brilliant hues of orange and purple. Mara knew they couldn't stay here indefinitely. Shelter Ridge was temporary, but it was enough to let Snowscale regain strength. Tomorrow, they would continue their journey to the nearest human station, where he would have medical attention, protection, and the opportunity to thrive. As night fell, Mara placed a small thermal blanket over Snowscale, leaving his head uncovered so he could see the stars. The hatchling snuggled into the cloth, his body finally relaxing after a day of survival, stress, and danger. Mara watched him carefully. "You're safe now," she whispered. "I promise." For a long time, they sat in silence. Mara looked up at the stars, bright against the black sky, and thought about the Veshkar. She respected their traditions, even if she had defied them. She knew that Ralcor would watch the hatchling's progress with careful eyes, perhaps even learn something new about his species through this unlikely human intervention. Above, the stars twinkled like scattered jewels. The desert night was quiet, save for the soft wind rustling across the rocks. Mara felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years of missions, patrols, and long, lonely journeys across barren planets. Snowscale stirred, making a small chirp. Mara reached down, letting him crawl into her palm again. His tiny claws wrapped around her finger, and she could feel his warmth against her skin. He trusted her completely now, and she understood that this trust carried a responsibility far greater than any protocol, mission, or law. "You'll grow up fast," she whispered. "Stronger than anyone expects." The hatchling blinked slowly, almost knowingly. Mara smiled. The next day, they set out for the human station. The path was difficult. Rough dunes, scattered rocks, and pockets of dangerously hot sand. But Mara drove with careful precision, Dylan assisting with navigation and environmental controls. Snowscale remained calm in his little nest, occasionally peeking out to watch the passing desert. Along the way, Mara thought about what the future might hold. Snowscale could be anything, a scientist, a leader, a symbol of hope. She didn't know yet, but she knew this. The small albino hatchling, abandoned by his own kind, had survived because of human care, courage, and compassion. Hours later, the station came into view, a small human outpost nestled against a rocky cliff. Its solar panels gleaming in the sunlight. Mara's heart lifted. They had made it. Safety, warmth, and proper care awaited. As she drove toward the landing platform, she glanced down at Snowscale. His tiny red eyes were alert, his small body steady. He had survived the dunes, the heat, and even the threat of his own species. He had survived because someone had refused to give up. "Almost there," she said softly. "Almost home." When they arrived, a team of human scientists and medics rushed out to meet them. Mara carefully lifted Snowscale from his nest, keeping him close. The scientists examined him with gentle hands, noting his fragile frame, his pale scales, and the remarkable strength he had shown in surviving alone. "This is incredible," one of them said. "An albino Veshkar hatchling this far along, alive and responsive." Mara nodded. "He's tough, smarter than you think." The scientists smiled, and the medics began setting up a secure environment for Snowscale. Mara stayed close, keeping a hand on him as if he were her own child. "Don't worry," she whispered. "You're safe now." As night fell over the station, Mara sat with Snowscale in her arms, watching him curl against her warmth. Outside, the stars of Serath 4 shone bright and endless, a promise of new beginnings. Snowscale let out a soft chirp and nuzzled closer. Mara smiled, feeling a quiet joy she hadn't known in years. This small, fragile creature, once abandoned on the scorching dunes, now had a future filled with possibility, care, and hope. For the first time, Mara allowed herself to imagine what he might become. Perhaps he would be a bridge between species. Perhaps he would show the Veshkar that compassion could coexist with tradition. Perhaps he would remind everyone that even the smallest, weakest life could make an impact on the world. And Mara knew one thing with certainty. She had done the right thing. The albino hatchling, abandoned on the sand, had cried alone once. But now, in the arms of a human who refused to leave him behind, he had found something far more powerful than survival. He had found trust, care, and a chance at life. The desert night stretched on, endless and full of stars, and somewhere, deep in his tiny chest, Snowscale's heart beat steady, strong, and ready for the future. Mara whispered once more, "You've got a whole life ahead of you, little one, and we'll face it together." And for the first time since his birth, the albino hatchling did not cry. He dreamed.